No. No? No. No? I mean, could we? All right then, sure. Today I want to talk about boundaries. I think like a lot of other women, I have really struggled with the concept of boundaries in my life. When my Witches poem came out and it was all about the power of saying no, it seemed like a message to the world that I was really, really good at boundaries, and the world really wanted to test that. And what an incredible opportunity to practice boundaries that was for me. I ended up working with a life coach for a few weeks. Hey Ash! So he said something which completely transformed the way I look at boundaries, and I want to share it with you. If you already know me and my work, you'll know that I love reframes, and what Ash did was completely reframe the concept of boundaries and preferences for me. It started with a really simple question. Do you know what the difference between a preference and a boundary is? And I was all like, of course I do! Turns out I didn't. So I'm going to lay the difference between a preference and a boundary out for you, just in case it is as helpful for you as it was for me. Preferences. I'd rather you didn't, to be honest. So a preference is something that we'd rather didn't happen, but if it did happen, we'd find some way to deal with it. Now, a preference is very different to a boundary. A boundary says this cannot and will not happen, and I will take these exact steps to ensure that it doesn't. It also says if you cross this boundary, I will do these exact things to ensure that you can never cross that boundary again. The difference being that a preference has this sense of, I'd rather it didn't happen, but I can deal with it. Whereas a boundary says it will not happen, and I will make sure it won't happen. So boundaries have consequences. Now, what has happened to me in the past is if I feel like I'm in a situation where I've named my boundaries and they've been crossed, yet I don't feel strong enough to actually take action on them, I turn those boundaries into preferences. I'd rather you checked in before you came round my house. I'd rather you asked me before you touched me. I'd rather you listened to me when I said no. What I noticed happening in the past for me is that I'd lay down a boundary. It would then get crossed. And instead of taking action and laying out the consequences of that crossing happening, I turned that boundary into a preference. And that's kind of like punching myself on the inside. Telling myself I'm not worthy to have boundaries. Telling myself that what I want doesn't matter as much as what somebody else wants. On the flip side of that, I'd start going to places where I had preferences, like I'd rather you wash the dishes every day. And I'd turn them into boundaries. So things I felt I could control, I'd get really, really strict on. And I came across as the control freak. When really what was going on is I was trying to make up for the fact that I felt absolutely helpless in the boundaries in myself that did matter. However, with the new reframe around the difference between a boundary and a preference, I've been able to look at myself when I say yes and when I say no to something and really ask myself, is this a boundary or is this a preference? Is this thing that I'm saying absolutely no to actually something I'm that invested in? To the point where I'll actually take responsibility and step into the action of the consequences? Or is this thing that I'm letting slide actually a core boundary for me? And if so, what are the direct actions that I can take to ensure that that doesn't happen and will never happen again? I really hope this reframe around boundaries and preferences was as helpful and transformational for you as it was for me. Remember, whoever you are, you have complete right to say no to anything that doesn't feel right to you. And remember, your voice is not just wanted, but very much needed in this world. Hey, me again. Thanks so much for all your support and love for my videos, for my poetry, for my spoken word. If you like what I do and you want to support me, I would love to invite you to join me over on Patreon. There you get early access to my content, to my videos, and you'll get behind the scenes stuff. And there's other kinds of cute little rewards that you can get too. So please do come and join me. I'm trying to reach the goal of $1,000 a month and I would love your support in that. See you over on Patreon.